All right, welcome everybody to the Jim Acosta Show. It is Monday, and don't despair, ladies and gentlemen, because love is in the air. Trump's romance with the Russians continues. Forget the Cold War; it's getting hot in here between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Steamy, you might say. The Cold War is out. The hot piece is in a flaming piece, depending on your point of view, I suppose. But the big headline today: the Kremlin says that the Kremlin and the White House are aligned when it comes to policies. As I was just saying, it's a little late for Valentine's Day cards, but Donald Trump basically got one from Vladimir Putin today. As the spokesman for the Kremlin, Dmitry Peskov, said the Trump administration's foreign policy, quote, and this is a quote, largely aligns with our vision. This is what Peskov said, according to Russian state TV. This is Dmitry Peskov. The new administration is rapidly changing all foreign policy configurations. This largely aligns with our vision. Those are the words from the Kremlin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov. All that is left, of course, is for Putin and Trump to get matching charm bracelets after the president's disastrous meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Just to run through some headlines, you can see them on screen right there. First of all, that's Alexander Vindman. He's got a new book coming out, The Folly or the yes, the folly of realism, how the West deceived itself about Russia and betrayed Ukraine. We're going to talk about that in just a moment. Alex, if you could just hang in there, I'm going to run through a couple of headlines on this Trump Putin bromance that continues. This is Donald Trump. According to the Washington Post, he is meeting with officials this afternoon to discuss whether to end military assistance to Ukraine. That is according to a senior administration official who said that to the Washington Post. And Trump continues to go after Volodymyr Zelensky. He said this on Truth Social earlier today. This is the worst statement. He's talking about some comments that Zelensky made that could have been made by Zelensky. And America will not put up with it for much longer. It is what I was saying. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has America's backing. And Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. This is all from a Truth Social post that Trump put out earlier today. Let's discuss with Alexander Vindman. You can see him right there. He is the author of the new book, The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. And Alex, you and I were just chatting a little bit before we got started here, and you were saying that the title of your book could only be off by a couple of letters in terms of what's going on right now. You kind of called it. I mean, this book could not have come out at a better time. I mean, this is what you've been warning about for a while now.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly, I think you called me Nostradamus, but
Yeah,
uh,
Nostradamus is
but
about right.
yeah, I mean that's right. I think the subtitle I would just change it to "Deceives itself about Russia and betrays Ukraine." That would
Yeah,
frankly be because it's continuous, and the only thing that really surprised me thus far is I was very confident that Trump would cut Ukraine off immediately, and it's taken only about 5 weeks. Now,
yeah,
whether he actually follows through because the Republicans, there are still Republicans that want to support. Some of them have actually broken, the sycophancy and been a little bit critical of that Friday meeting. At least three of them, all on the House side, not even on the Senate side.
yeah,
But there, and I think he's getting. Speaker Johnson identified Russia as the villain, and Ukraine as our ally. Um, and I think while these guys do not have are not going to venture out and criticize Donald Trump publicly or even let anything sneak out, Rubio and Waltz must be counseling him that this would be a dangerous move, that this would just further rupture the relationship with our alliance. Last week,
yeah,
just remember what happened last week on Monday, on the third anniversary of the war. Trump sided with Russia. He sided with North Korea against our allies, and basically undercut the condemnation of Russia as the aggressor. He
yeah,
criticized Zelensky as a dictator, and then on Friday, Zelensky, frankly, probably his biggest mistake was even doing this meeting because
yeah,
I think if he was a better judge of Trump, he would have known that this was he was going to wade into something that could trigger the worst case scenario, and instead he's been very successful charming other leaders, and frankly connecting with them on security, mutual security interests. It's not that the
Yeah.
Europeans are entirely altruistic; they just know that their security is at stake. And he tried to make the same point to the Trump administration, and all he did was, basically get attacked. So it
Yeah.
was a pretty disgusting turn of events. Now, just to wrap this current state of affairs up,
Yeah.
now you basically have this situation in which there's a demand for regime change, but it's not the regime change that Biden was saying. Putin's a dictator. He's looking to kind of destabilize the world. He's attacking U.S. interests. This is a regime change in which Trump is asking a fellow ally to resign. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on the record right here. I'm going to call it: the Ukrainians and the Europeans can't work with Trump. I'm calling on Donald Trump to resign, and then we can find somebody reasonable for our allies to work with. There we go. That's it. It's
There you
out there
go.
now. Yeah,
I mean, if Lindsey Graham can call on Zelensky to resign, why can't Alex Vindman call on Donald Trump to resign? I mean,
yeah,
all's fair in love and war, and there's a lot of love between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. I mean, maybe you could say I was overstating things at the top, but I don't think so. I mean, what's going on here? I mean, that's the
yeah.
thing. I mean, put this into context, Alex.
Sure.
When the Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, who has been at this for a long time, like Vladimir Putin, like Sergei Lavrov, um, when he puts out a statement like that, he's not doing it to make life better or worse for Donald Trump. I mean, he's just putting it out there.
Mm,
He's just saying it the way it is. I mean, it's kind of a remarkable thing to
yeah.
hear from the Russians.
Sure. So
It's
the
amazing.
mask is off. They don't have to be, kind of like delicate in their support of Donald
Yeah,
Trump. Donald Trump is leaning in, hugging the bear, and whether it's as the national former national security advisor Nikolai Patrushev said, which is that Trump Trump's election was bought, and therefore Trump is obligated to return the favor. I think that guy's just throwing hand grenades because he knows he could muck around and sow discord. There's
yeah,
something to this bromance, and what's shocking is this book is written with a historical view. It's written about there are 35 years of relationships between Russia, Ukraine, and the U.S. And it starts off with in 1991 when the Ukrainians achieve independence, in a moment where just months before George Bush is in Ukraine and tells the Ukrainians, "Chill out. You want independence. You want your own country. Don't not so fast. There's why don't you stay with Russia? There's remain part of the empire. You don't need to race towards independence." Now the
yeah,
Ukrainians blow them off, and it's shocking that the Ukrainians have had the fortitude to go it alone, challenging the superpower back then, and frankly holding their ground now. That's what Zelensky did. He held his ground in spite of lies, in spite of declarations that he was the dictator, the Russians are the good guys, that he is a warmonger, the Russians are the peacemakers, that that Ukraine is responsible for the aggression. But that's where it started.
yeah,
You fast forward through critical moments like denuclearization. The U.S. put some of the pressure really on with Russia on Ukraine to give up its nuclear weapons. It's not until we entice them with some desperately needed funding and support that we got them on board. Hardball does not work with these folks. They have fortitude. They're going to stand their ground. Same thing in the Orange Revolution when the Russians attempted to buy the election for a pro-Russian candidate. The Ukrainians went out on the street in force
right.
and held their ground. They had a second revolution in 2014 when this same pro-Russian character attempted to suppress the will of the people to get closer to Europe. They will go out and fight. They are
Yeah,
not pushovers. And Donald Trump obviously has no clue about the history. He doesn't understand that the Russians are inveterate liars. They've broken every agreement that they signed, and that the Ukrainians are just stating facts that
yeah,
in order to have a lasting peace, there needs to be some security guarantees.
right.
There needs to be some, and it's not going to come on the back of accommodation and appeasement, which is exactly what Trump is doing. So Trump is what I refer to exercising the poison Kool-Aid phase of the folly of realism. Okay, this
Yeah,
is a cult now, highly transactional, and what happens? It ends up being uh, it doesn't end up well when you're drinking the Kool-Aid in a cult.
Yeah,
So I think at this point it's extremely dangerous, and the question is whether cooler heads could prevail or the pressure, because he was that was a massive mistake. What he did
yeah,
in the White House it plays well with a hardcore MAGA base, but it actually is creating some significant blowback from our allies and domestically. Now, whether that
yeah,
catches up with him before he makes a declaration tomorrow at this speech in front of the in front of Congress is unclear. But
yeah.
he's likely to double down on mistakes.
He definitely doubles down on his mistakes, and I think you made a great point. I want to hold the book up again because there were some folks who were entering the chat during our conversation saying, "What book?" It's Alexander Vindman's new book. In case you're just tuning in a little bit late, it's "The Folly of Realism: How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine." The latest great book from Alex Vindman, and you make an excellent point, Alex, about it's a misreading of the Ukrainians. They have wanted this for some time. They have wanted this not just independence from Russia, which they have. They want to feel part of Europe. They don't want to feel like they're part of Russia. And Trump and JD Vance and some of the folks in the MAGA base, they just don't get it. You can ram this down their throats, down the throats of the Ukrainians. They're just not going to want it, which is why you saw Zelensky surrounding himself with those European leaders over the weekend, essentially saying, "Well, if I can't get this from the United States, I'll try to get this from the Europeans." And
Yeah.
so it's not as though Trump is going to change Zelensky's point of view on all of this. He's not going to suddenly turn up, wake up tomorrow and say, "Oh yeah, I'd love to be part of Russia." It's just
Yeah.
not going to happen.
What we saw in that room was maximum malice and maximum ignorance.
Yeah,
Ignorance is not no understanding whatsoever of the fact that we've been deceiving ourselves about Russia, that they are getting played. Vance is getting played. Trump is getting played hard, harder than any U.S. leader in in any recent memory, maybe even ever, has been
yeah.
played by an adversary. But
But
it's
what about
also
Rubio? I guess Alec, what about
yeah,
Marco Rubio, who has been a hawk on Russia for
yeah,
some time now, or at least publicly he's been that way. And the
yeah,
way he's just sitting on the sofa, like he's looking for the remote control or something to
yeah,
change the channel. I mean, this
yeah.
was
It was
just
uncomfortable. It was
it
uncomfortable
was
watching him.
awkward, man.
Yeah.
But this is what Trump has done to the Republican Party writ large.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact is that he's been emboldened. Just to finish quickly the thought,
Oh yeah,
that
sure, yeah,
the so that's the maximum ignorance, but the maximum malice is that they could care less about Ukraine. They're willing to give away all of Ukraine because
yeah,
they don't think that it's relevant to U.S. national security when it's absolutely critical. And that's the malice. They want to normalize relationships to Russia. Now, folks like Rubio and Waltz, the national security advisor, they
right,
understand the dangers, but they are cowards. They know that they may even know that there's a time clock on their careers in this administration because nobody lasts. There is a massive turnover, but they want to stick around for at least a little while. Maybe they promised themselves that they were going to be in there to be the guardrails against the worst instincts. But guess what? It's happening. It's happening in front of your eyes. Uh, I hopefully you're working hard behind the scenes, and I sense that early on in the previous weeks. We were only 5 weeks in, but I sensed that tension because what ended up happening was when Hegseth declared that Ukraine is going to have to give up territory. You know, Trump backed him up. 24 hours later, both Trump and Hegseth backpedaled. So that
yeah.
they had that. Now that's it. They're basically now towing the party line, and the Republicans in general have come out towing the party line. And guess what that does? That does the same thing that happened to Putin. It emboldens him. It
Yeah.
breeds a sense of impunity, and it means that he's gonna keep following his horrible instincts and make even more damaging mistakes. God forbid the guy declares that we're withdrawing from NATO tomorrow. That would be one of the worst things that could
Wow.
ever happen to us.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point because tomorrow evening Trump is going to have this speech, a joint session of Congress. It's sort of like a State of the Union speech, and he is sort of teasing this idea that he is going to make a big announcement tomorrow on Ukraine. The Washington Post was reporting earlier today that he was meeting with officials to talk about cutting off military aid altogether. Alex, what would that? I mean, Friday was enough of an earthquake. If he makes a
Yeah,
big announcement like that during a speech to a joint session of Congress, I mean, it is
yeah,
going to be something.
yeah.
It is going to be
Well,
like something we have not seen in years and
yeah.
decades in terms of
So
a new relationship between the United
yeah,
States and Europe.
I think that's right. So first of all, the folks in the Kremlin will be drunk for days. I mean, the Chinese
They'll
couldn't
run
be
out of
happier.
vodka.
I
Yeah,
mean, they'll be like, crack open those plans for Taiwan. The U.S. is completely unreliable.
yeah,
The Europeans that are deathly afraid, they're scrambling and trying to talk, Zelensky into apologizing, which he can't. By the way, he could maybe apologize, but he can't, he can't completely fold. Why? Because his most important relationship is not the U.S. His most
yeah,
important relationship is with his own people. It's with the troops that are fighting, and he needs to continue to look strong for his people, for the morale, so like this they could hold their ground.
yeah,
He needs to look strong against Putin. It is wrong to think that the most important thing he has to do is to accommodate Trump. We, in certain ways, have an inflated sense of self. Yes, we helped Ukraine, no question about it. Ukraine would have been in a much more difficult situation, but the first 6 months we weren't even there. They basically did
yeah,
everything themselves. And guess what? We're 3 years on. The Ukrainians have a military-industrial complex. They have a much more capable military. The Europeans, although they haven't done nearly enough, they've stepped up. And
yeah,
really, what the Ukrainians have is they have 6 months. They have 6 months of stores. They have 6 months of supplies, in which the Europeans will have to just break glass and do whatever they need to figure out how to support Ukraine. And they're not going to be able to do it to fill all the gaps of the US absence, but this does not fold. It just
yeah,
means that in the second half of this year, things look more precarious. But if the Europeans do step up in a significant way, then the pressure shifts back to Russia, because Russia does not have endless staying power. It
yeah,
has more troops, it has more material, but it is losing enormous amounts of troops. It might have to do a mass mobilization. It can't call up troops indefinitely, and the material is, they're relying on Soviet material
yeah,
increasingly on the hardware. So it is a completely lopsided view towards Russia, and it's not so lopsided. It is. I would absolutely hurt if Trump announces, and maybe he's likely to announce that he's going to withdraw tomorrow. But it would be a disaster, and the Europeans would then be like, "Okay, that's it. We no more
yeah.
North Atlantic Treaty Organization, no more Euro Atlantic Alliance. We're in this by ourselves." And then what we've done is we've undermined our own long term efforts to remain the head of the largest, most important pole in a multipolar world, and we devolve into regional, much more regionally oriented security apparatus or structures, and that's dangerous for the United States.
Yeah, it really is. And I just want to emphasize again the book from Alex Vindman just came out. It is The Folly of Realism: How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. Alex Vindman has already written one keeper of a book. Here's another one. Alex, great to talk to you. Good luck with the book. I know you're doing this book tour thing, but I mean, my goodness, all of this news happening just as it's coming out, it just makes the book all the more relevant and your voice all the more relevant right now. Really appreciate the time. Always good to talk to you.
Thanks, Jim, and I want to congratulate you on your making sure that you still have a voice. We got 6,300 people on this sucker. I don't know
Yeah,
if that's a record for you. It's a record for me. So
great.
keep up the fire, and looking forward to being on with you again.
Sounds good. Now I'll bring you back over and over again,
Yeah.
and appreciate it very much. And next time, I'm just going to have some sports bets coming your way. Who do you have in
Sure.
the NBA,
Lotto
March
numbers. Yeah. Yeah.
Madness? Alex is the new Nostradamus, no question about it. Alex,
Yeah.
great to see you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
All right, appreciate it.
Bye.
It's a heavy time. You got to have a little levity, and that's why I was saying at the beginning of all this, it is like love is in the air with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. It's there's just the damnedest thing. Also on the show this hour, we're back at Michael Monday. Michael Cohen joins me in just a moment here. I'm going to bring him into the discussion in just a few seconds, and then a little bit later on in the program, want to bring in Elise Labott, who is a veteran foreign affairs correspondent here in Washington, a former colleague of mine. You're really going to love to hear from Elise Labott. She is just a sharp journalist and has a lot of great things to say. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring in Michael Cohen. I understand he's ready to go. It is Michael Monday. And I think this is already becoming a thing. I know we've done this a couple of times now. And what's great about it is everybody has just embraced this. They've just said, okay, yeah, bring it on, Michael Monday. And we've got a lot to talk about, honestly, because and there he is right there, real Michael Cohen, as he's known here on Substack.
Jim,
Um,
how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Hey, thanks for doing this as always. One of the things that I
Michael
want to talk
Mondays, my brother, Michael Mondays.
Michael Mondays, and I do want to talk about Ukraine because I know you have some thoughts on this. But the other thing that we need to get into at some point is Trump is apparently going to go through with these tariffs, and the stock market is taking a huge hit this afternoon. One of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected is because of his promises on the economy. So I want to get to all that. I want to talk about that and the way these Republican town halls that have turned rowdy and fiery. He's blaming that on paid troublemakers. And so I want to talk about all that. But first, let's get your take because I just talked to Alex Vindman a few moments ago. I was just talking about his new book. You've written a lot of successful books. What were your thoughts when you saw that debacle go down in the Oval Office on Friday? And then we'll get into some of these other topics in the news because I know you get a lot to say.
Well, to begin, very saddened for our country, saddened for Ukrainian Americans,
Yeah,
saddened for Ukrainians. I'm saddened for the world where you have the United States ditching our ally for the benefit of an adversary. It's so un American in so many ways.
yeah,
But as I was watching this debacle unfold, I was taking notes for my Substack, and I ultimately wrote a piece which I entitled The Art of the Deal, Ukrainian Style. And what I truly believe is that it's very simple to understand Trump if you do an analysis, a profile analysis on him where you know it's all about his ego. You know
yeah,
that if you don't stroke the ego, that there will be a temper tantrum. And as a direct result, I believe that President Zelensky went in knowing that he was not going to capitulate to Trump's demands.
yeah.
And I wrote my whole Substack on it, whereby I believe Zelensky played Trump knowing that
Fascinating.
he was going to get angry. J.D. Vance jumped in, made it easy for Trump to express it further his anger about the appreciation, despite the thousands of times that Zelensky. I also
Yep.
wrote another I wrote another Substack that friends don't ask friends for thank yous, right?
Yeah.
You don't
That's
thank
right.
people.
Exactly.
It's weird,
That's a
right?
great
You
point.
say it once and then enough is enough. If you're friends, if you are allies, you don't need constant reassurance or constant thank you.
And
So
it's a
I
friggin'
believe,
war. It's a friggin'
right?
war. So I mean,
So
do we thank one another when you hand over more ammo? I mean, you just don't do that. It's a
I
war.
mean, how many
They're
times
fighting
do
for
you
their
thank? How many
survival.
times are you going to thank me for coming on to the show with you? How
Uh,
many times does it have to be every minute?
yeah.
The 20 minutes or so that we're going to be on together. You say it
But
once and you move
Donald
on.
Trump. But Michael, Donald Trump, and you're absolutely right. He needs that constant stroking. What is it about him that he needs? I wrote about this on my Substack. It was sort of like a break glass, stroke POTUS moment right after the whole thing was over. They put out all these calculated, coordinated tweets from Marco Rubio and Christy Nolan, and
But
all
it
said the same
didn't
thing.
work.
Thank you, Donald Trump. Yeah,
But it didn't work. That's the problem. And
didn't work.
Zelensky then went on, knowing that he was going to meet with the Prime Minister Starmer of
Yeah,
England, of the UK, and they offered him like $2.5 billion for immediate funding to purchase munitions. On top of that, all of Europe combined together have pledged like $20 billion. He's good for now when it
yeah,
comes to funding. Question is, will they be able to provide the armaments that they're talking about? But at the end of the day, he now has he has now brought in all of Europe on
yep,
his side. And that's not going to inure to the benefit of this Trump administration. And I'll tell you, as much as people will be surprised to hear me say this, I don't believe that this is Donald Trump's fault. And he's saying, well, how could it not be? Right?
yeah.
Even he acknowledges that at the helm, you take all the it's all of the sycophants and all of the
Well, that's
enablers
true.
that are
Yes.
sitting around him. There's nobody there like the way I used to do it and say, Mr. Trump, that's a terrible idea. Let me explain to you why.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he's going to change his mind, but
At
There's a
least you have
better
somebody
than
there trying to
likely
slow him
chance
down.
he's hearing it and he will do
That's right.
something to change. There's nobody there anymore. When you see a Marco Rubio or a Lindsey Graham or a Tulsi
Yeah.
Gabbard, they're all stepping up and they're all like, well, first of all, thank you, Mr. President, for your incredible leadership and what
Right.
you are showing the world. What are you showing the world? You're showing the world that we don't care about our allies, that
Yeah.
we partner up with our adversaries. What are
Yeah.
you showing them? That America can't be trusted?
Yeah. And that image of Marco Rubio on the sofa, it's
You
sort of
mean the
like
one where he was catatonic?
that the way that's the way I look when my Commanders lose on Sunday. I'm kind of like,
Yeah, get used to it.
pass me another beer, drown my sorrows. But I mean, this is somebody who was on the Intelligence Committee in the United States Senate. He understands the threat. He understands what's going on here. And it's just to me, yeah, you're absolutely right. You don't have the John Kellys anymore. You don't
No,
have the Jeff Sessions, the Jim Mattis types, and they were all run off the first time around because of the way he is. But Michael, you and I've talked about this before. What is it about the Russia thing? You know Donald Trump because one of the
it,
things that he went off on
yeah,
during that whole temper tantrum that he was talking about Russia, 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 which is his code word for the Russia investigation. As I tell people all the time, Donald Trump Jr. met with a Russian attorney at Trump Tower during that 2016 campaign, as did Paul Manafort, as did Jared Kushner. There was some level of attempted collusion going on at that time.
no,
And
no. That's what bothers him the most.
yeah,
What ended up happening there is they thought that they were going to get dirt
yeah,
on Hillary Clinton,
yeah,
on the emails, and so on. It bothers him because there really was not the Russian collusion that mainstream or cable news television were putting out there, that
yeah.
he was having them. What he would do is he would say, Russia, if you're listening, it
I
would be
remember that.
great if
Yeah,
you can get that. He wasn't asking Vladimir Putin to do it, though he was asking Vladimir Putin to do it. He
yeah,
wanted to see those emails, but they
yeah,
weren't reaching out and calling. I got into trouble because I called the Kremlin and I was grilled on this by Congress, by I think it was Hipsy. It was either
yeah,
Hipsy or Sipsy that went ahead and grilled me on it. Well, how did you get the phone number to the Kremlin? Right?
yeah,
You must have got I Googled it.
yeah,
In fact, if you Google the Kremlin, it will give you the number. And
yeah.
so I called and they asked me, what were you calling for? To set up a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald
I
Trump,
remember that. Yep,
considering when
yep,
Obama said to him he would not meet with him during
yeah,
the United Nations General Assembly. I said, clearly he'll have a few minutes. He goes, maybe he'd like to try a Mar-a-Lago burger and meet with Mr. Trump. And I just thought it was funny. Now, mind you, I did it at Donald's request. So then
yeah.
they said to me, "Well, it doesn't meet with protocol. We won't be able to do it." I said, "Okay, but if by chance you do, Mr. Trump would love to have a
But
chance to shake your
I
hand and say hello."
Yeah, but he's just caught up on this and he won't let it go. And to me, it's like there's just something weird there
What
between those.
Trump likes,
Yeah,
Jim, what
yeah,
Trump likes is the tough man sort of machismo
yeah.
that
It's who he wants to
Putin,
be.
yes. Think about it this way. There's pictures of Putin allegedly wrestling a bear. There's photos and photos and photos of Vladimir Putin, who is allegedly a black belt in Samba, which
Yeah,
is a martial arts form. And I
yeah,
know that he's pretty damn good because I know the guy who instructs him. He used to fight actually for Trump's MMA company called
yeah,
Affliction. His name was Fedor Emelianenko. He fought for us.
yeah,
I started that company for Trump. And
yeah,
Fedor Emelianenko is like the number one heavyweight in all of MMA. He is a Samba expert and he
yeah,
fights and teaches Vladimir Putin. We've
yeah,
watched as Vladimir Putin was playing with the Russian national hockey team. And of course, he scored 12 goals, more than
yeah,
anybody in history, right?
yeah,
Right. Nobody checked him, nobody stopped him. And
yeah, yeah,
when
yeah.
somebody shoots the puck, you better let it go through or you
You
lose
better
your
let it
leg.
go through. Yeah,
Right.
off to
That's
Siberia.
what
Yeah,
Trump wants.
yeah. He just wants constant fawning. He wants the dear leader treatment. There's no question about it. Michael, let's talk about I want to talk about a couple of other things because you've seen these fiery town halls that these Republican lawmakers have
Yep.
had. Trump put out a Truth Social today. He said that paid troublemakers are attending Republican town hall meetings. It's all part of the game for Democrats. But just like our big landslide election, which was not a landslide election, it's not going to work for them. And Politico wrote this that Trump's Truth Social post came after a new round of Republican-hosted town halls grew heated in recent days, with Congressman Keith Self, Senator Roger Marshall among those who faced angry constituents. You got, I mean, what is going? I mean, there's no evidence. Politico says to suggest that the Democrats have been paying people to attend. It sounds as though Trump doesn't want to deal with the reality of the situation. That his first few weeks of his new administration are not going over well with the American people, and not going over well in red Republican districts and in red states.
Think about it this way: Tom Swazi out in Long Island,
That's right.
+5, +6 for Trump during the election. Tom Swazi got up there and he lambasted Trump for
Yep.
doing what he did with Vladimir Zelensky. The crowd went crazy.
They went
Then
wild.
again, on CNN, you listen to, I always forget what his name is, the Republican that's always fighting late night
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
whatever his name is.
Whatever his name is.
Suffice it to say, he is continuing to parrot the same lie over and over and over again because they're only playing to a party of one. They're
Yeah,
playing to one man's ego. And the more that
yeah,
you stroke the guy's, Scott Jennings, right? The more that
yeah,
you stroke the guy's ego, the longer your sustainability is. It's why
yeah.
you listen to the Lindsey Grahams, why you listen to Marco Rubio, who did a 180. He did a 180 on Vladimir Putin in 24 hours.
Yeah. But it says to me that, they thought they were a little too clever here, and that they were just going to, put these Doge cuts through. They were going to do things like they're doing with Zelensky right now, and that the base would just go along with it. But it sounds
Yep.
as though there are Republicans who, I mean, we're hearing reports about veterans who were losing their jobs at FEMA and places like that, places where they hire veterans to work in the federal government, which is actually a really nice thing to
I
do for
actually know
veterans who need a
one,
job.
Tim. I
Ex-
actually know
right.
one, and he is livid. He did 2 tours in Iraq, I think one in Afghanistan. He
Yeah.
just started like 6 months or 7 months ago after a whole slew of physical rehab and whatever it might have been, and he was remained in the service. And now he had that job and he got the notification. He is,
Yeah.
by the way, he's a Republican, a lifelong Republican. In fact, he voted for Trump both times. All right.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I just don't get it.
Yeah.
I don't understand. But you know what? This is going to be a real issue for Republicans because they are not laying off Democrats, not laying off independents. They're laying off Republicans too. And
Yeah.
what happens? How do you break out of the cult? Right?
Yeah.
How do you break out of the cult? You know how? You have nothing in your pocket. You have no food on the table. You have no money for rent. And you say,
Yeah.
whoa, 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 hold on 1 second. What about I'm going to make your life better? The campaign promises. What happened to the 24 hours? I'm going to bring egg prices and milk prices and bacon
He
prices
didn't
down.
do it. He didn't do it. And now the stock market is tanking. It tanked today because of these tariffs that are supposed to go into effect tomorrow, 25% on products coming in from Canada and Mexico. And Trump has said this is what he's going to do. The market doesn't like it. People are going to start looking nervously at their 401k plans here in the coming days because of all of this. And the thing that's happening with these town halls, though, it's an interesting situation, Michael, because this is where the dear leader thing bites them in the rear end.
Yep.
Donald Trump expects the dear leader treatment no matter what. If they're yelling at you at the town hall, you still have to give them the dear leader treatment. And, or else you're going to get primaried in the next election cycle. And so you can see a situation where this is really going to eat at Republican poll numbers. It's really going to cause a lot of problems for some of these members of Congress and senators who are in swing states to get reelected. And tell me how much Donald Trump cares about all that. He doesn't care one bit. Doesn't care one bit.
Neither do the billionaire class that is surrounding him. You think
Yeah,
they give a shit if the eggs are $10 a dozen or
yeah,
$100 a dozen? They have so much money that they can't spend it in 10 lifetimes, in
yeah,
50 lifetimes. So it doesn't. But what it doesn't mean anything to them. But you know what means? You know what means something to the average American, right?
yeah,
That's who it means something to. And now, on top of everything, you have gasoline prices going up. I thought we would drill, baby, drill. I
yeah.
thought
What
that
happened to that?
drilling was what happened to it is the question.
Yeah, and it's because I mean, he. Let's be honest with everybody. Donald Trump rode a wave of bullshit back into the White House. He said things, like drill baby drill, and making these empty promises about lowering prices at the grocery store and so on. And he doesn't really have the first clue how to do any of those things. I mean, he just doesn't. And and so folks are finding out. It's sort of an FAFO kind of situation.
Which
And
which goes, by the way,
yeah,
Jim, to what I
yeah,
was saying before, that I truly don't hold Donald accountable for this. And again, people will think that's crazy.
yeah.
Why?
Well, I
Well, I'm
hold him
going to
accountable, but your point is correct. I
Because
get your
every president has the right to come in with their agenda, whether we agree with it or we don't. In fact, much of what he comes in with, I don't agree with. There are
yeah,
some things I do agree with, but there are most of the things I don't agree with, or the manner to which he intends to put them forward. It's why the people around him need to balance him out. They need to be able to, like what I used to do on a regular basis, say, no, boss, no good. That's not
yeah,
going to inure to your benefit, and explain to him why. He has the right to come in with his own agenda. Right. People didn't like Barack Obama's agenda. People didn't like Bill Clinton's agenda. They didn't like Trump's first agenda. They didn't like, they didn't like Biden's
yeah.
agenda.
Well, but
He has the
yeah.
right to bring in his own agenda, but there comes a point in time that you need balance in that administration. There is no balance.
But he doesn't
How do
want
we
it. He
know
doesn't
that?
want it. This
Of
he see
course not.
he sees
Loyalty test.
he sees the problem with this first administration was that he listened to too many people from the establishment of the Republican Party who said, "Oh, you need this person in there, you need that person in there to sort of calm things down in D.C." He's not interested in doing that this time around. He's filled his cabinet with sycophants. The one person who did sail through the confirmation process, Marco Rubio, who a lot of people in Washington had a lot of faith and confidence in, was just sitting there on that sofa looking pathetic. It
Yep.
looked That's the Secretary of State of the United States just looking pathetic.
Yep.
And I don't think and so that's where I do assign the blame directly over Donald Trump's head because he is the one who wants this, and it's because of his fragile psyche, his fragile ego, that he needs the strokers there. He needs the enablers there constantly, and it just
But
makes me
even an
wonder.
enabler, Jim,
Yeah,
should be able to say to him, look, you and I are friends. All
yeah,
right. And, I will agree with you. It's your show, whatever.
yeah,
But I will come back if you turn around and you want to say, ABC that is so outlandish. I
yeah,
would say to you on the side, hey, Jim, it's probably not a good thing for you to say. It's not going to inure to your benefit. And you do whatever you want. It's almost like,
yeah.
friends don't let friends drive drunk, right? It's the
Oh, yeah,
same
sure.
thing. And it's why MAGA needs to change its name. It's like make America gullible again.
Yeah, I
You
saw
were
you.
right. He actually sold a line of bullshit to the American people and
Yeah.
rode that wave straight back into the White House.
And it goes to this issue with the tariffs, which I'm sure he's going to tout tomorrow night. I mean, it's timed where these tariffs are going to go into effect. It sounds on the same day that he's going to address this joint session of Congress, a la State of the Union speech. He thinks about things in simplistic terms, in a sort of childlike way. I can wave a magic wand and I can do tariffs. I can wave a magic wand and I can do this on Ukraine. I can wave a magic wand and do this on immigration. And it just in these Doge cuts. And in the real world, you just can't do that sort of
Right.
thing. It just doesn't work. I mean, the Washington Post, this is what people need to be bracing themselves for. The Washington Post reporting tomatoes, t-shirts, oil, cars, among the things that could get more expensive with the new tariffs. If you're pissed off about gas prices right now,
Wait till your
we
guacamole.
or your
Wait till your
guacamole,
avocado. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, just in time for Cinco de Mayo. I mean, listen, within the next couple of months, people are going to be feeling the pain from these cuts, and that's why the stock market went down today. People might say, "Oh, I don't really give a crap about what happens on the stock market," but the financial markets are responding to what they think could be coming. I mean, there was some talk. I saw
okay.
Mark Zandi, respected economist, was saying today that the Atlanta Fed was forecasting basically the GDP to go down by 2.5 to 3%
Which is
over the next quarter.
crazy. It's
Uh,
crazy numbers, but I'll go one step even
Crazy.
further.
Yeah.
I'll go one step further. Even when it hits you in your pocket, there's
Yeah.
still so many MAGA that will not step away from the guy. They will
Yeah.
not step away
They
from
won't
the
do it.
king.
That's true.
But you know when they will? And you know when all of America is going to really say, I've had enough? Look at what Pete Hegseth just did, where
Yeah.
he now disbanded with the stroke of a pen the oversight for the Russian hacking, that entire division. Think about what
Yeah.
we're talking about here. What happens now when they do hack in to our systems and they
Right. The
completely disrupt everything? They're not stopping because Donald Trump is in the Oval Office.
cybersecurity. It's cybersecurity. You're lowering our defenses with an adversary. I mean, I got the dogs barking here because they can't handle this. This is pissing them off too. And I mean, but this is what people voted for. And you and I have talked about this before, Michael, to some extent. And you were talking about that Tom Suozzi town hall the other day. People are going to have to absorb what they have voted for,
Yep.
and perhaps in time it will bring people back to their senses. I mean, I just don't think I agree with you that there are a lot of folks who are never going to give up on Donald Trump. They are ride or die with Donald Trump, but that's not the totality of the
Well,
American
then they shall
voting
die.
public.
Then they shall die because
Yeah,
you don't lower your force field. You don't lower your shield,
yeah,
right? When the other guy is swinging an axe, right?
yeah,
That's what he did. He took the shield, he threw it away, and he said, "Here I am,"
yeah,
right? Because Putin fears him. That he's telling his people, "Do not dare
yeah.
try to do anything to America," right? Because Donald Trump is in the Oval Office. If
Well,
anybody wants to believe that bullshit, right, you need to see a psychiatrist.
yeah, and don't forget Donald Trump. Not good when it comes to a midterm election. Yes, he can win presidential election, and contrary to what he said in that Truth Social post, he did not win by a landslide. He won by a couple of million votes in the popular vote, and just by a very slim margin from a percentage point of view in that regard. And so, you know, I covered him in the 2018 midterms when he got his clock clean. Then Democrats took control of the Congress. In 2022, people took a whiff of what all those election deniers are doing, trying to
Yep.
run for political office here and there. Got his clock clean there, and I suspect the way things are moving in the direction of right now, 2026 not looking good for him.
Well, I don't even want to try to look ahead because I don't have the crystal ball.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
more concerned right now about
yeah,
the dismantling of our government agencies, about
yeah.
Elon Musk running around, jumping around. And
Well,
so
that's
I think
true.
Saturday Night Live hit it perfect on that Oval Office skit, right? But the only thing
Yeah.
we were missing out of the lunacy that was going on there was Elon Musk in the background holding a chainsaw.
It's incredible. Well, and I'm glad you brought this up because the last thing I want to talk to you about, Michael, about is some great reporting in the New York Times. David Fairnhold and his team, his colleagues at the New York Times, have a great story about these dodgy Doge cuts, as I'm calling them. They're not all that they're cracked up to be. This is what the New York Times is saying. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency has deleted hundreds more claims from its mistake-plagued wall of receipts, erasing $4 billion in additional savings that the group said it had made for U.S. taxpayers. Last week, this is according to the Times, Elon Musk's government cost slashing initiative posted an online, quote, wall of receipts celebrating how much money it has saved by canceling federal contracts. But guess what? Now the organization has deleted all of the 5 biggest savings on that original list, that wall of receipts, after the New York Times and other media outlets pointed out that they were riddled with errors. Here are some of the errors that they made. They said that they cut $8 billion over at ICE. The actual contract in question was worth $8 million. So they said it was $8 billion that they cut, but the contract in question was $8 million. This is according to the New York Times. 3 $655 million cuts at the USAID This was actually a single cut that was erroneously counted 3 times. This is reported by CBS News. And a $232 million cut at the Social Security Administration. Here, according to the New York Times, Doge appeared to have mistakenly believed that the agency had canceled a huge information technology contract when it had only canceled about a tiny piece of it worth $560,000.
Jim, you're a
It's
nasty
outrageous.
guy. Jim, you're a nasty guy. And that's all fake news. That's all fake news.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But I'm sorry to bore everybody, bore the pants off everybody reading from the New York Times, but my God, Elon Musk gets up there. It's a lot of smoke and mirrors and bullshit. And I think that's what Trump likes in Elon Musk. He gets up there, waves a chainsaw around, wears this Occupy Mars t-shirt. You're giving Zelensky crap for what he wears in the Oval Office, but yet Elon Musk is wearing goofy outfits in the Oval Office. And the cuts that they're claiming that they're making at Doge are bullshit. They're not making they're making some cuts. They're happening here and there. Absolutely. But the ones that they're saying that they're the biggest ones that they're claiming aren't what they're cracked up to be.
No, and then they make all sorts of mistakes, from the condoms in Gaza, which was really Gaza province in Mozambique, $50
Yeah.
million, which it amounts to a billion condoms. The whole thing is a lie. I mean, there's so many things that are inaccurate
Yeah.
because they're rushing. That's the whole thing. One thing that Trump doesn't appreciate is that government is complex.
Yeah.
That you don't want, as the president of the United States or as the secretary of one of the departments, you are obligated to provide correct information. Now, I
Yes.
personally don't even know, and I read all day long. Every newspaper, I read everything, reports, I read it all. I don't know what Doge is. And I had a
Yeah.
Republican who came on my podcast, right? Not my TikTok live. I
Yeah.
had this Republican come on and say, "That's because you're stupid. Doge is Department of Government Efficiency." I said, "No, you schmuck. What I'm asking you, is it a department? Is it an agency? Or is it a program?" Because there are very serious
Yeah.
distinctions between those 3 words. One, you need somebody who's going to be appointed and confirmed by the Senate. Another one is a position appointed by the president. The other one doesn't exist. There is none. It is an
Yeah.
advisory role. I don't even know what Doge is. And now we finally learned who's really leading it, but she says she's really not. She just learned that she is.
Yeah.
It's they forget that government is complex. It requires a lot. And they think
Yeah.
that they can do it with 25 loyalists. And that's really what they're looking to do.
Yeah.
Dismantle
Well,
everything.
and they can cause a lot of pain. There's no question about it. I mean, some of these cuts are real when you're eliminating most of the USAID. You're causing a great deal of pain and suffering in places like Africa, where they rely on USAID to provide critical services like HIV medication and so on. And so it's sort of like Elon Musk is this guy with the chainsaw, but he's it's sort of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He's just going through there like a psychopath and cutting stuff that, honestly, it's just going to hurt a lot of people.
But you
And they
do have to acknowledge something too. Everybody was
Yeah.
fearful of RFK Jr. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
he stood up, right? Texas is undergoing now that
Yeah.
measles scenario, and he turned
I
around and he said, "No, I want people to get vaccinated with the MMR, measles, mumps, rubella
Yep.
vaccine, and so on." Finally, good for him for standing up and for doing what we all know is right. But I'll tell you
Well,
where I could never forgive Trump on. I can't forgive him onto it. When he allowed them to start cutting from NIH,
yeah.
cancer research
Cancer research.
for
What are you
children.
doing?
For
What do
children.
you
What are you doing? Is there anything more precious in this world than
Yeah.
children? And of course, it depends on who you ask that question, right?
Yeah.
Trump may say, "Yeah, gold's more precious than my kids," right? And I'm just being sarcastic now. There is
Yeah.
nothing more important than the future of the world, and the
Yeah.
future are children
That's
and the
right.
children's children.
That's
So if
right.
there's something that we can do to spare a child,
That's right. Absolutely.
how do you?
This is
It
You got to
killed me
have
when I
heart. You
heard
got to
that.
have heart, man. You can't be completely heartless. And when you bring in the world's richest band, he didn't become the world's richest band by having a lot of heart. I'm sorry, it just doesn't sound that way. It sounds like to accomplish whatever crazy cockamamie goal he has in his head, he will do just about anything. And I personally I don't trust him. I don't trust him
I don't
with
trust anybody that doesn't believe in children or the
I
future of children.
I agree with you 100%. And somebody and cutting people at our nuclear security
Medicare,
installations,
Medicaid, how about
Medicaid.
or SNAP?
Yeah,
People live thanks to SNAP, thanks to
yeah,
food stamps, and so on. And now,
yeah,
because it's not fitting into your Doge ideology, you're going to
yeah,
tell people who are not capable of sustenance without SNAP, without the
yeah,
food stamps, that you're now going to tell them that you don't deserve to eat either.
yeah. It's it's enough to get you pissed off on a Monday, and I think we've done that, Michael. Good to see you as always. Really appreciate it. We could go on and on like this, but we'll
And
save.
we
We got to
and we
save something
will
for
next
next time.
Monday. And we will
Exactly,
next
Michael
Monday.
Monday. Sounds good. All right, see you, Michael. Great to see you, buddy.
Jim, be well,
Thanks a
brother.
lot. Appreciate it.
Always.
Always great to see Michael Cohen. I'm going to bring in Elise Labott now because, and Elise hasn't been on the show yet, but she and I go way back. She's a friend of mine. We have been colleagues before in the past, and I want to go back to this conversation on Russia and Zelensky and wrap things up a little bit at the end with the story that Michael was alluding to there a few moments ago, and that was on RFK Jr. and his vaccine flip flop. But there's Elise Labott right there, my old colleague, Elise Labott,
Great to be with
veteran.
you, Jim. Congratulations on just kind of going it. I think this is really where you need to be, and I think the
I'm enjoying
success
it.
that you're showing. Yeah, yeah. You need to.
I
We need Jim unplugged.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I used to say the word bullshit from time to time, but I was a bit more
I said it
judicious
on.
about it.
I said it once. I
And
said it
I
once,
remember you did too. Yes, you did too. But here you could just say bullshit all the time and it's totally fine, especially on
and
a
it's
Monday.
it's and it's applicable.
And on that note, let me just ask you this, Elise, because I was talking about this with you with Alex Vindman at the top of the show, talking about a
Yeah,
little bit with
great
Michael
interview.
Cohen. But you have been there in the trenches as a reporter. You've covered the world. You've been all over the world with secretaries of state. You know the foreign policy and security posture of the United States that we've had going back decades. What is happening right now, in your view, to all of that, given what we're seeing right now? I mean, Trump does not sound like he's backing off of these threats as they relate to Ukraine and Zelensky. And it sounds like he may pull the plug on American military assistance to Ukraine in this speech tomorrow.
All right, well, we'll break it down. I mean,
Yeah,
look, on my Substack, Cosmopolitics, I wrote Trump's pivot to Putin. I didn't
yeah,
write it Friday. I wrote it Wednesday, right? When
yeah,
Keir Stammer was coming, and
yeah,
it was all about like what's going on here. And Friday just kind of amplified it even more. But I think what we're seeing, it's not just about Ukraine. It's not just about one awkward conversation, right?
yeah,
It's this kind of public unveiling of America's new alignment with an authoritarian power, i.e., Russia, over democratic allies. And we can talk about how happy Putin is.
yeah,
Everything, I think it was Ben Rhodes that said on TV, like, everything Putin ever wanted since the fall of the Soviet Union came full circle this week. And, it
yeah,
didn't happen overnight, as we know. Trump has shown this affection for Putin. But, when this reporter said to Trump, how are you gonna, what would do if Russia violated the ceasefire agreement? And Trump was like, they trust me, they trust
yeah,
me. And then he went on to talk about the whole hoax.
yeah,
Okay. He feels a kinship with Putin. This is an emotional attachment he has to the guy. And it's not just about Putin, it's about this rules. And we've talked about it so much. And I know we're going to talk about it more over the weeks and months to come. But it's this whole idea of the world World II order,
yeah,
the foundation of American prosperity and security for generations kind of going kaput. And what Trump is saying is, Europe, Ukraine, little countries, they're not going to decide what happens in world affairs. It's big men, it's me, it's Putin, it's Xi.
Yeah, and it's disturbing. I don't think he's fully thought this through, and he's not a fully thinking things through kind of person. Obviously, you can think through a scenario where, okay, Putin gets everything that he wants. Trump cuts off military assistance. The Europeans can't backfill. Putin decides to launch a big offensive, and Ukraine possibly falls. And one just has to think, and at least you tell us, one has to think that Putin is not going to be satisfied there. He's going to want to continue to do this. You and I both reported on this. One of Putin's goals has been to reconstitute the Russian Empire, the Soviet, to some extent, the Soviet Union. And that means bringing back those satellite states that used to exist during the Cold War. And that just, he's not going to stop with Ukraine if he wants to satisfy that vision.
Well, he's not going to stop, but I do
Yeah.
want to kind of inject a little bit of optimism into
Mm.
it. It's really hard, right?
Let's do it. Yeah.
I
We need
don't
it.
think it's going to just all go like that
Mm.
for a couple of reasons. First of all, let's say Trump really wanted that deal. He wanted it for, America and the mineral wealth and all the things we've been talking about. But
Yeah.
he also wanted to see that he was making the deal. And I heard that, he was so excited going into the White House, into the Oval Office meeting. He was
Yeah.
going to be the savior. Obviously it went south. Um, Zelensky rains on his parade doesn't mean that it's completely over. And I don't think Trump is going to wholesale cut off assistance, even if he'll say something dramatic tomorrow. We know he can't help himself.
Right.
But I don't think he's going to cut off Ukraine aid wholesale because he doesn't want an Afghanistan on his watch, Jim.
Yeah.
He doesn't want it. And so he wants to be seen as doing the most while actually doing the least. And I think that he does believe that, maybe in his heart of hearts, that he's doing the right thing. I don't think he's
Yeah.
like, let me
But
screw Ukraine as much as I can and help Russia as much as I can. But the
yeah.
way he feels about Putin and the way he's orienting this, obviously that's what's happening.
Yeah. And but what do you make of when we saw over the weekend Zelensky meeting with the Brits, the French, basically much of the NATO alliance without the United States, standing there with Zelensky? Can the Europeans really pick up the slack and do for Ukraine what the United States might not do anymore? Or was that kind of just a show there of support for Zelensky? What do you think?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Mm,
Obviously, they can't do what the US can do with those big, sophisticated weapon systems,
yeah.
but they can do a lot. And you might have seen last week, I think it was, his Sir Alex Younger. He's the former head of MI6, and he did this, very popular interview on BBC. And he's like, "Listen, it would be hard, but we can do it."
Mm,
And so I think what you're seeing is a few things. I thought the British Prime Minister coming in last week handled Trump beautifully. He came in, he said, Europe wants a seat at the table, and we're willing to pay for it. We want to put in troops. We want to help carry our share. And so I
yeah.
think, and then you saw like all these European leaders over the last few days saying, we're going to need to go it alone.
Yeah.
Maybe he could say, yeah, Europe, go it alone. Does America want to be, isolated with just Putin? I don't think so. So
Yeah.
I think if the UK even could be a bridge between Zelensky, Europe, the United States, I think this French plan that's coming out, which would be a 1 month ceasefire, and then we'll talk about the rest, it
Yeah.
could be a face saving way for everybody.
Interesting. And then these tariffs may go into effect. It sounds tomorrow, and it sounds like it's coinciding with Trump's big speech before Congress. Again, talk about the Twilight Zone, bizarro world. We're slapping tariffs on products coming in from two of our
Yes,
biggest allies, Canada.
yes,
I mean, it doesn't get bigger than that. I mean,
right.
there are next door neighbors. So are the Mexicans, of course. There's a little bit more of a complicated relationship because of the border issues and so on. But the Canadians are so hopping pissed off at us right now. I mean, we're at a time when we're detaching ourselves to some extent from Europe. It doesn't sound like a great time to do the same thing with the Canadians. It just,
Right,
yeah.
right.
What do you make of
Or
this?
or the Australians or anybody. I mean,
Well,
look,
yeah,
couple of things here.
yeah,
First of all, if Trump wants to get out of Europe, if he wants to get out of the Middle East, if he wants to get out of everywhere, doesn't he
Yeah.
realize that allies can help him? That's a lot
Right.
of things that they can do. They're good for business. He doesn't realize the strength of allies, like America first, but doesn't mean America alone. And then
Yeah.
the other thing is, and I think, we should talk more about this another time, but and you were talking about it with Michael a little bit about USAID. What does the US have? Not just the military might, but soft power.
Right.
And by, giving up USAID, which is like the biggest piece of soft power the US has, by sanctioning our allies with tariffs, it's just kind of giving away the store without getting
Yeah.
anything in return. And I mean, we don't have the industrial base now to like build everything American. We're
Right.
going to need those products. And Americans who voted for Trump, you already talked about it with Michael, you already talked about it with Alex. Like,
Yeah.
people are getting fed up. This is not what they voted for.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
It's a great point, and you know this all too well from traveling to all these different countries. If you want a country in Africa to be on our side versus the side of the Chinese, the best thing that you have going for you is USAID and those programs that do so much good in countries that just need the help. And
Yeah.
we pulling our people out of those parts of the world, pulling our resources out of the parts of it just sounds self-defeating as hell.
And I'll tell you one other thing, Jim.
Yeah.
People that know Africa pretty well, and our old colleague Zane Vergie is doing a lot of great stuff
Mm,
in this space. Um, there's a lot of growth. There's a lot of innovation.
that's
There were
true.
a lot of young people. And if Trump was like this forward looking businessman, he'd look at Africa and he'd see that's where the future is. And you know who
Interesting.
sees that? Xi Jinping.
Yeah, he does.
And
He
that's
really
why
does.
China is like eating up Africa. That's why the Saudis are looking into Africa. The Gulf is
Yeah.
looking into Africa to kind of, retreat from Africa. Not exactly a good business move, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, Elise, it was great reuniting with
Oh,
you.
it's great
It's
being
sort of
with
like
you.
being at the water cooler again.
Yes,
Let's do it again. And the Substack is Cosmopolitics,
that's right.
and it's Elise Labott, one of the best diplomatic reporters in Washington. It's so good to see you
It's
and
great
catching up.
being with you.
All
Look
right,
forward to doing it again.
we'll do it again. We'll do it again and again and
Okay,
again. Great to see you,
sounds
Elise.
great.
Thanks a lot.
Bye bye.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
Thanks for coming on. It is great. It's one of the great things about this show is like last week when I had April Ryan on. I just, it's like I got my friends here. You know what I mean? And Elise is just one of those people. Whenever you run into Elise, around town in DC, you just strike up a conversation with her, and she's just as warm as you saw right there, and so knowledgeable. And when she disagrees with me, she says, Jim, let me just think about it a different way. And she doesn't say, "You dummy, this is how it really is," which is I do appreciate that. Um, I do want to thank Alex Vindman for coming on the show today. His new book, The Folly of Realism, is out right now. He's terrific. Michael Cohen of Michael Monday. If it's a Manic Monday and a Michael Monday, my thanks to Michael and my thanks to Elise Labott as well. And I do want to leave us with this. And I'm gonna do some hard thinking about this. I hope everybody else does too. I suppose if you're Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a great time to embrace vaccines is when you're the HHS secretary. So we do appreciate RFK Jr. doing this, but I do want to leave you with this because it's sort of an oh really moment. I talk about the dear leader moments. This is sort of an oh really moment. RFK Jr. doing a vaccine flip flop. CBS News reporting that the HHS secretary, Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a noted vaccine skeptic, voiced support for the measles vaccine on Sunday amid a deadly outbreak in the Southwest, mainly in Texas. This has been very worrisome to me. An unvaccinated child who died in late February in Texas was the first U.S. fatality from the highly contagious disease in a decade. Talking about measles, of course. Recently confirmed as HHS Secretary, Kennedy has previously made numerous false and misleading claims. CBS reporting about the safety of the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, the MMR vaccine, and had downplayed the growing outbreak, saying annual outbreaks were not unusual. But on Sunday, Kennedy said he was deeply concerned about the recent measles outbreak in an op-ed on Fox. So, I mean, people might say, "Oh, Fox," and roll your eyes. It's probably a good place to put that op-ed because we need people to go out there and get their vaccines. And I see somebody saying he didn't completely backtrack that much. I agree. Now, you're not going to hear me say throw a ticker tape parade for RFK Jr. The amount of damage he has done to this country is astounding. The way he has undermined American confidence in vaccines is astounding. And this is not really making up for any of that. But if he can, to some small extent, convince all of the people out there who buy into this nonsense and BS about vaccines, if they can be told like, hey, yes, please have your kids get the MMR vaccine, this would definitely do some small piece of good. And I just want to leave it with that. I'm not giving him a pass. I'm not doing any of those things. It is horrifying that he's the HHS secretary, but it is interesting, isn't it? When you get in the job, when you get in the job and you find out that the real world is not in line with your cockamamie conspiracy theory ideas. And I just wonder out there, what are all the other vaccine skeptic folks in that community thinking about this right now? That one of their leaders, RFK Jr., is putting this out there. What it tells me, and this goes a little bit to what Michael Cohen and I were talking about earlier in our conversation. I'm going a little bit over. When you work for the government, when you work here in Washington, lives are at stake. Lives of people, of Americans, are at stake. Children's lives are at stake. And we don't know the circumstances of this little kid and why he was not vaccinated. I don't know the answer to that question. I hope and pray it has nothing to do with the vaccine nonsense coming from people like RFK Jr., who is now finding it important enough to put an op-ed on Fox that maybe you ought to go out and get your MMR vaccine. This is the kind of stuff we all did as kids for years in this country until COVID came along and there was an industry, there was a grift for people to raise concerns and questions and so on about vaccines. And it's shameful. It's absolutely shameful. But I will say there might be just some small bit of good that he's done in all this. And I did want to leave it with that. It's sort of an oh really moment. Oh really, RFK Jr. Now you're okay with vaccines. Gee, thanks. It would have been nice if you had said that for years. But it just goes to show you when people's lives are at stake, maybe some of these conspiracy theories can go out the window. I just saw somebody say, "What about the flu vaccine?" I get my flu vaccine every year. Like, what is the big deal? You know, somebody chiming in, nice flip flop, RFK. Absolutely, a total flip flop. All right. Again, I went a little over there, a little bit longer show today, but everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Somebody saying bring on Fauci. I would love to bring on Dr. Fauci. He's a terrific American. But in the meantime, thanks everybody for watching. Still reporting from Washington. I'm Jim Acosta. Duke is around the corner over here. I got to go take him for a walk. He's been giving me that look. We got to go. Have a good evening, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Take care. Bye bye.